anubodh2019@gmail.com. We need to assign her the Marathi channel.
Yes, Siddharth, you're
Sukanya?
on it. Yeah, you're on it.
Yeah.
The number still increasing.
Yes. So Sukanya, once this is done, just I will need a go ahead from you, and then I can start the webinar.
Sure, Siddharth.
Yeah. Sukanya, can we start?
Yeah, Siddharth, we are just waiting for Alice, who's one of the interpreters, to join the link. But rest, I think we are all set with other channels.
Okay, so I think let us start, and then once the interpreter is in, we can ensure that he or she gets assigned to the correct channel.
Sure. All right.
Is that fine? Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I hope we are live and we are recording. Okay, great.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, great. Sharmila, you have a query. I see your hand is raised, or is it
Yes,
a?
I haven't yet received interpretation channel. I messaged
Sukanya?
few minutes back and you
Mhm.
discussed about it, but I still have not been. I can't see it on my screen.
Okay. Sukanya, Sharmila has still not been assigned with the channel.
Just checking.
We are okay. Sharmila, if it is fine, can we move ahead while Sukanya takes care of this issue, and you can use the chat to coordinate with CSE Media so that you are assigned the channel.
All right.
Is
Yes.
that fine?
My colleague will start anyways. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
take turns to interpret. So that's not a
Sure.
problem at
Yeah.
all. Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Great. Okay. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Siddharth. I work with the Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi, and we represent a team called the Solid Waste Management and Circular Economy. A warm welcome to all the participants to this webinar, which is being co-organized by Center for Science and Environment, SWaCH, and KKPKP. We were really overwhelmed by the number of registrations that we received for this webinar. It was as high as 900 registrations. And we've already been joined by as many as 250 participants. And we also have today with us over 10 experts in the field of solid waste management who have critically analyzed the draft solid waste management rules 2024. Now, to give everyone a context, the Union Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change, which is also called the MoEFCC, has introduced the draft solid waste management rules 2024 in the month of December 2024. These draft rules, what they've done is they tried to put a lot of thrust on the bulk waste generators through introduction of bulk waste generators certificate mechanism. Uh, and this certification mechanism is very similar to the EPR certification that we see in the plastic space, which is governed by the Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016. Now, while this draft rule requires all the bulk waste generators and the waste management service providers to register themselves on a portal for maintenance of data. This is like one of the core activities that this rule basically is pushing for. And while the existing and anticipated EPR schemes, which are, again, they are a separate set of rules which will not be discussed here in today's webinar, but they have a very close connection. Uh, while these existing and anticipated EPR schemes promote the principle of polluter pays, the proposed solid waste management rules try to put the onus on the consumers to encourage and incentivize the idea of waste minimization. Now, these draft rules, as it happens with every other draft rules, is open for public comments for a period of 60 days. And people, individuals, organizations can comment on these by writing to the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change till the 7th of February 2025. Now, this webinar is an attempt to critically analyze the draft solid waste management rules 2024 and will help individuals and organizations alike who want to actively contribute in shaping up the future of waste management in the country. Now, to give you an overview of what we will be doing in today's webinar is focused on understanding what is the draft rules all about, its implications, and what are the changes that our experts that we have today with us are proposing. Now, obviously, it's a bulky document, but what we have done is identified a few areas that need urgent attention and intervention. So we will be doing a comparative analysis of the 2016 rules and the draft 2024 rules. We will be focusing heavily on informal sector integration. What are the hits and the misses? The bulk waste generators, which is a very core part of the draft rules. We'll also look at very nuanced domains like waste to energy and sanitary waste. And after listening to all our experts on these issues, we will open up the floor for question and answer. Now, before I move on to our speakers, there are some housekeeping announcements that I will make. Participants are, although this is in a webinar format, but it's always better that all the participants keep yourselves on mute at all times, and participants might be given a chance to speak at the end of the webinar, time permitting. You can post general messages like your thoughts, opinions, observations about the rules itself in the chat box to ensure that, and please make sure that the message is sent to everyone, including the panelists. If you have any specific questions on the interventions that are made by the experts that you want to be answered or responded to, please use only the Q&A box to do that. If you have a question for any panelist, put it only and only in the Q&A box. Do not use the chat box for asking questions, although you can use the chat box for general comments. Now, we will be sharing the draft rules in the chat box once this discussion starts. And what is very important is that in this webinar, we have simultaneous interpretation that is happening. While this webinar is happening in English, we have simultaneous interpretation for regional languages in Hindi, Kannada, Marathi, and Telugu. So with that, I will call upon my first speaker for today, And the first speaker is Mao Sengupta. Mao is a postgraduate in sociology from Calcutta University. She has about 18 years of experience to her name in the sphere of local governance, with special focus on decentralized and pro-poor planning. Mao's professional journey has a mixed balance of working with civil societies and governments. Mao is currently working with the Center for Science and Environment as a program manager. So over to you, Mao. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. Without wasting much time, I'll just start. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Mao, you can go full screen.
Yeah, just a
Yeah.
second. Okay, so as Siddharth said that it's really a 60-page or a bulky document, and it's difficult to kind of cover all the components within this stipulated time. So we have identified quite a few agenda. So what I'll be doing is I'll be trying to focus on the what was there in the 2016 rules and what is there in the draft rule, what is proposed around those agenda. So first of all, I will start with the scope and the applications. So rural local bodies and entities under its jurisdiction have been first time mentioned in this rules 2024 draft rules 24, which was not there in case of rules 2016. When I say rule 2016, I mean solid waste management rules 2016. So I'll go a little fast. So in rules 2016, three-way segregation, source segregation was essentially mentioned, which is biodegradable, non-biodegradable, and domestic hazardous waste. But in draft rules 24, we have seen that sanitary waste is another category or stream of segregation which have been mentioned. And then the duties of waste generators, as we all aware that our solid waste management rules since 2016, it's been divided into two main components. One is duties for the waste handlers or the urban local bodies and other stakeholders, and another is the responsibilities and duties of the waste generators. So here in 2016, the duties of waste generators started from the source segregation point. But in draft 24, what we see that duties of waste generators is starting from the waste minimization concept, which is essentially we can say a shift that we are starting with this. We are giving most priority to the waste minimization, essentially, which is a part of waste hierarchy. And there is a nomenclature change in the nomenclature where domestic hazardous waste is being now called as special care waste in the rules draft rule 24. There was a very important aspect around the street vendors. There were specific responsibility mentioned for the street vendors. They have to segregate. They have to put it in a different container. They have to hand over it to the authorized waste collector or the local body, whoever is been assigned by the local body. But this concept of street vendor is totally eliminated from this draft rule 24. But what we find is very important, especially in a urban setup. Street vendors should be categorized as a and given specific responsibility as a waste generator. Then there was no separate provision mentioned for the horticultural waste management or agri residue, which has got a place in solid waste management draft rules 24. And all local bodies must facilitate the collection, storage, and utilization of agri residue. And horticultural waste, there should be special compost pits should be established in large parks by the local bodies. And in the which I'll come later about the centralized portal. So the annual report around this stream of waste has to be uploaded by the local bodies. Then PCC has to confirm and to report to in the form 5. So it's around waste characterization. Can I give some time to just remove the bar over there? Just a second. Height floating. Yeah. Actually, I was not being able to see the top part of that my slides. So it's around waste characterization and assessment. Although in the main draft there is no such mention about that, but in the reporting format, in the form 4, it said that SPCB and PCC has to confirm that whether this waste characterization and assessment has been done or not by the local bodies, and this report has to be uploaded in the centralized portal. Then Then I will come into the bulk waste generators part, which is the, we can see a complete overhauling of the bulk waste generator system in the Rules 24, draft Rules 24. And I have just categorized into different components. So in terms of definition and duties and mandates, implementation framework. In terms of definition, what you can see that there were two main categories to identify a certain entity as a bulk waste generator, which is an entity which is generating 100 kgs or more waste per day and having an area of 5,000 square meter area or more. But here it has been expanded rather with having a water consumption of 5,000 liters or more per day, and the area is now to 20,000 square meters or more for such an entity which can be considered as bulk waste generators. In terms of roles and responsibilities also, earlier it was 3-way segregation as the rules itself said, but now it's 4-way segregation, which includes the sanitary waste also. And it is said that existing bulk waste generators, if they're unable to establish any in-situ facilities, then they can be exempted, but they must engage a third-party service provider or concessionaire appointed by the local body. And they have to register themselves in the centralized online portal, which is going to be launched by the CPCB later on. After 6 months of the rules will come in place. Then there is introduction of this centralized portal, as I said, is there, and that's the implementation framework as termed in these rules. Then if I go by prescribed timeline, so in 2016 rules, it was mentioned that within the 1 year of the rules come in place, the bulk waste generators has to establish their in-situ facilities for organic waste management. But now it has been categorized based on different population size of the cities or urban local bodies, and also like for example, it's ranging from 16 to 18 months time frame has been given, and for the rural bodies, it's from October 24 to October 28. Different targets and timelines have been given. And regarding environmental compensation, which is a very crucial agenda which has been included, so it has been introduced in Rules 24, which was not mentioned in Solid Waste Management Rules 2016. And it is said that the environmental compensation shall be levied by SPCB, district coordinator, and other stakeholders and entities on bulk waste generators for quantum of waste mismanaged, environmental harm, or reporting and registration lapses. If they fail to do this, the environmental compensation will be levied on them by such and such entities. Then regarding monitoring and reporting and role of other stakeholders. So earlier it was said that in Rules 2016 that ELBs monitor compliance with general guidelines, and there was no standardized reporting format for bulk waste generators, especially mentioned. But now bulk waste generators must only engage with entities registered under this rule. So all the entities who are registered, they only can provide service to the bulk waste generators, and they have to submit their annual report based on this extended bulk waste generators, which we call EBWGR, which Siddharth has already mentioned. So these obligations has to be maintained, and they have to submit annual reports on waste segregation, processing, and compliance via this portal. There have different, roles of different stakeholders, including MoHUA, CPCB, local bodies, and it's been categorically mentioned different roles. And MoHUA essentially is to provide technical implementation oversight, developed guidelines. CPCB is to monitor and technical guidelines and creation of this portal. Local body is basically to enforce and data validation. Then if you go a bit little about the EBWGR, then in 2016 it was not, as I said, specified, but in 2024 draft rule, it is said that BWG must fulfill their EBWGR by processing wet waste, handing over collected dry waste. So all the basic duties and responsibilities were assigned. Now it comes under the purview of this EBWGR for them, and they have also obligations for total solid waste generated will be calculated based on these norms, and later on a guideline will come which CPCB is supposed to draft in consultation with MoHUA and DDWC, that is Department of Drinking Water Sanitation. Then the certification, as Siddharth mentioned, that BWGs must procure EBWGR certificate from the local body if unable to set up decentralized waste processing from the local body for processing the equivalent of total wet waste generated by them. And they must obtain this certificate for proper collection, transportation, and processing of dry, special care, and sanitary waste. All the categories have been included in the purview of EBWGR and the process of certification. Then some added responsibilities which was not mentioned earlier. So it's about the construction units, it's about the public transport entities, it's about the airport, malls, and stations. Everybody has to maintain their own solid waste management systems, establish their internal management systems. They must not litter, they must clean and manage construction waste. The construction unit must manage their on-ground work with the proper waste management system. And bulk waste generators under Biomedical Waste Management Rules 2016 must not mix biomedical waste with solid waste and report disposal details annually. So, and also there is one particular thing which has been added here, that is the solid waste generated by the industries. Although they are not defined at bulk waste generators, but they are all the responsibilities and the criteria to be selected for this category is just aligned with the responsibilities for the bulk waste generators. But in the very definition of these industries is not defined as bulk waste generators per se. Then if we go into the changes within the biodegradable waste management system, so uh, among them 2 or 3 components which are very important has been given emphasis. That is the incentivizing byproduct use, home composting, setting standards, preparing guidelines, and different ministry and departments have given, as you can see, different responsibilities. Promoting home composting and testing facilities is something which is very crucial in terms of waste minimization, which has been given emphasis. And also local bodies are given responsibilities to manage horticulture and agricultural residue waste, and incentivize to private developers to invest in biogas and biomethanation and composting economy, especially in the rural sector. And again, in this case also, registration of all biomethanation, CBG, and biogas plants in CPCB portal. In terms of MRFs or material recovery facilities, the definition has expanded that saying that sorting of biodegradable and compostable plastic is also been included within the MRF. And then MRF entities also must register with local bodies in portal and comply with CPCP standards. There is the mandate of quarterly reporting. There is also timeline has been stipulated for establishing and managing and running and registering the MRFs. Although we have a dedicated session on this about the RDF and WT, there will be a discussion, but there are some significant changes, like the capacity of waste to energy plants applying for authorization is now being changed from 5 to 10 TPD. And there is the fuel and the alternative fuel can be mentioned. It's been RDF and agri residue has been added into that. And also the data and the availability should be uploaded on time. Annual report should be generated and uploaded. And the difference between SCF and different grades of RDF also mentioned in the draft rules 24. Around sanitary waste management, so in 2016 rules, although separate wrapping of sanitary waste, separate disposal, storing separately, segregating is being mentioned, but around the management of sanitary waste, there was not much mentioned in Solid Waste Management Rules 2016, but whereas in 24, it said that urban development departments must develop a state policy and strategy for this sort of sanitary waste management and establish incinerators and link with common biomedical waste processing facilities, and ensure environmentally sound management of sanitary pads and diapers via dedicated incinerators or biomedical waste treatment facilities as per CPCB guidelines. If we talk about landfills and biomining, so now mandatory biomining and bioremediation of all dump sites has been included. Earlier it was both the option was there. And it has 24 rules has introduces landfill user fees. There is the provision for quarterly reporting by landfill operators, and also biomining is the preferred method now in comparison to the 2016 rules.
Now you have 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay. So I'll skip. So the informal sector, we have a session. So I'll just focus on one thing, that there was a state level advisory board where representation of the informal voice speakers, the informal sector was there, which has been this state level advisory board has been eliminated from the new rules. Uh, just my last slide. So there are some areas of concern that some definition still needs or seek clarity, like what could be the exemption criteria, or what could be if on-site processing and standardized norms for calculating if bulk waste generators extended responsibility should be there. There is concern around transparency and reliability of these certificates. There is concern around because capacity building is very much needed for the urban local bodies and rural local bodies if they have to manage this portal and the access of this portal, and it should be user friendly. There should be more resource to manage the entire framework of EBWGR, and also there should be real time tracking of waste management and certification processes for transparency and accountability. Registering all waste management operating facilities into the centralized portal is a big challenge itself, which has some concerns for the practitioners like us. And also the exclusion of waste speakers into the advisory committee is a concern. And limited incineration capacity, high operational cost, and weak enforcement of emission norms in ULBs lead to improper sanitary waste disposal, which is definitely another concern. And that's all. This is my observation. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you so much, Mao. We will now move on to the next speaker for today, and uh, people can continue to post their questions in the Q&A box. Like I mentioned, for people who have just joined, there is simultaneous interpretation on the webinar. You have a button right on the right side of the Q&A box, and it specifies the language. You can actually click on it and choose a channel that you're most comfortable with. We have interpretation in Hindi, Marathi, Kannada, and Telugu. And with that, I will now invite my next speaker, who is Harshad. I'll kindly introduce him for all our participants. Harshad is the director of SWaCH Pune Cooperative, India's first autonomous cooperative of informal waste pickers. A lawyer by training, he has been a member of the central government's drafting committee for finalizing the 2016 solid waste management rules and plastic waste management rules. He also serves as the general secretary of Kagad Kach Patra Kashtakari Panchayat, a 10,000 strong member-based trade union of informal waste pickers in Pune, which strives to empower and enhance livelihoods of waste pickers in Pune. So with that, over to you, Harshad.
Thank you, Siddharth, for the introduction, and thank you to the entire team at Center for Science and Environment for helping to co-host this that. And very good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to try and quickly run through the explainer on what all is there for the informal sector and what is there right now. Next slide, please. Hello.
It's on next. I can hear you.
Hello.
Harshad,
Am I
I
audible?
think you are managing the slide, right? Or someone else is? For you?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Okay. Thank you. So as most of our participants would know, informal waste pickers in the entire informal sector, which is made up of waste pickers who pick scrap dealers, who aggregate high-level, large-scale aggregators who take different kinds of materials and then finally recyclers. The informal sector plays an extremely crucial role in ensuring recycling all across our country. There are an estimated 50 lakh informal waste pickers, a large number of them women, and almost all of them from marginalized communities, whether it's Dalit, Adivasi, or SC, OBC communities. They have no particular capital, network, or affinity to engage in formal private waste management practices, and they often enter into this sector by default and not by choice. However, their picking, sorting, transfer, and sale activity contributes to India having far higher recycling rates than any northern or western countries, and where they have been integrated into the waste management systems of cities. For example, in Pune, you see far higher rates of recycling. So in Pune, waste pickers recycle about 35 to 37% of the dry waste that they handle, as against a comparison of 12 to 4% in most other parts of the country. They are at the bottom, but also at the forefront of the recycling chain all across the country. Their lives are precarious. Of course, incomes are very low. There is no access to social welfare or social security. But the work that they do directly contributes to public health, to solid waste management and conservation of the environment. Now, as over the last 25 years, our country has moved towards improving formal solid waste management, introducing doorstep collection, removing containers, cleaning up the streets. Those who have managed this dry waste over the years have slowly found themselves being excluded and removed from the system rather than being integrated into it. And that's where we come to the 2016 rules, which for the first time introduced the title of waste pickers or defined waste pickers in any regulation or legislation. The 2016 rules had many gaps, but of course, the fact that they mentioned waste pickers for the first time was a huge benefit. The second thing was that the rules contained some general provisions where waste generators, some bulk waste generators, were asked to hand over waste to authorized waste because they were included in the definition of material recovery facilities, which said that material recovery facilities are those that have informal sector waste because sorting waste within their premises. In order to facilitate their integration and identification, the structure of the 2016 rules had the urban development departments of states required to consult with waste pickers to come up with a strategy for their integration, to have a scheme for registration of waste pickers and waste dealers, and also had representation from the waste pickers at a state level advisory board. As far as the local body was concerned, they were required to establish a system to recognize organizations of waste pickers and to integrate authorized waste pickers. However, the drafting and the language of these provisions was more persuasive rather than mandatory in nature. Even the section which required ID cards to be given didn't mention waste pickers. It said self-help groups should be formed and ID cards should have been given to workers, not specifically waste pickers. However, during this period, there are so many waste picker organizations, models of integration that have flourished, in part because of their own efforts, the work of waste pickers, their contribution, and also some support or some directives from the SWaCH Bharat mission and local body support. But if we see the position of waste pickers all across the country, it has been quite in shambles. The aspects of introducing policies, strategies, like formal registration mechanisms has not actually been implemented in most parts of the country. Now we skip over to the 2024 rules. The definition of waste pickers has been retained, and the definition relating to informal waste collectors has now been expanded to include those who can be called as dabba batli walas or feri walas, those who buy waste from waste generators and then sell it to scrap shops. Some of the general provisions for handing over waste to authorized waste pickers still continues, but these have to be juxtaposed against several other provisions relating to waste generators as well as bulk waste generators and operators of waste collection systems, which seem to exclude any potential of handing over waste to waste pickers. So there's a bit of a mix here. Integration has now been specifically mentioned as a mandate on the local bodies. Previously, there was some gap and the provision wasn't clear enough, but here it clearly says local bodies shall integrate waste because they have to maintain and report information linked to waste because, and this is definitely a very positive change. The MoHUA, the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development, did not have any role to play in the previous rules, but now they are asked to assist states in integration of the informal sector. On the other hand, there's also the creation of a centralized online portal where there is a lot of reporting requirement, which most waste pickers or waste picker organizations may not be able to read. We also have some glaring omissions within these rules, which would have really helped to ensure that waste pickers were get integrated going ahead. For example, the aspect of representation of this community in local bodies, state level or central level committees is just missing. The 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 aspect of waste dealers. So waste pickers sell their waste to scrap traders. Waste dealers were mentioned as a part of registration mechanisms in the previous rules, but in the current rules, there is absolutely no mention of waste dealers. They have been completely sidelined, and that really creates a hazard that the key players in the informal recycling sector might get excluded. There could have been provisions to support self-help groups and cooperative models to grow, but this definitely seems to be missing. Two more glaring omissions is that what is integration has really not been specified. And that means that every individual, every entity, local body is free to define what integration might mean and what it actually entails for the informal sector. And finally, one major demand of the informal sector of waste pickers and waste dealers of giving access to occupation-based social welfare and social security has been missed out in this as well. The argument has been that there is a direct contribution to the finances and the environment of a local body, and therefore waste pickers should be supported through social welfare schemes. Quickly coming to the next slide, we'll go through what are the progressive changes and what are perhaps areas that are missed out and regressive changes within the rules. Here, the state level policy that is to be formed by urban development and rural development departments of the state governments specifically says integration of waste pickers needs to be considered. Now, this is extremely progressive. However, very few states have over the years actually published detailed strategies or policies on anything with respect to solid waste management, much less followed them to a T. So while this is good, there is some gap there as well. There is some distinction between what the rural development department is required, which is to mandate and enforce integration of informal waste pickers. This is excellent, clear, directional language in the rules. But when you come to the urban development department, their mandate is to ensure registration. Now, one doesn't understand why there is a difference between these two, but this would be one gap that we would definitely push for being filled. While local rural bodies are required to engage with waste picker organizations, no similar provision is seen within the urban development department, within the urban local bodies. Again, ULBs, the language is much better. It says local bodies shall integrate waste pickers and organizations of waste pickers. Now, there, like I said before, the definition of integration really needs to be put in so that this provision can be taken ahead to actually ensure integration. There is a little more requirement of ensuring that waste pickers are actually mapped and their ward-wise information is uploaded by the local bodies to the centralized portal and report on how many waste pickers are working with the local body every year. Now, just direction for integration is not enough. The reporting requirement will really kind of close and bring it to a circle. Finally, MoHUA, which had no particular directives before, is now being asked to assist the states and union territories in facilitating integration of informal waste pickers. And MoHUA and SWaCH Bharat Mission really show the direction for waste management waste management has to happen. So this is a very good provision that has come. Now, if you look at some of the regressive changes, there has been tweaking of language all across the draft. So the mention of the informal sector from material recovery facilities has been removed. There are some exclusionary provisions within the waste collection and reporting mechanisms and the bulk waste generator mandates. Essentially, where before generators and bulk waste generators were asked to hand over waste to authorized waste pickers, we now have a situation where there is a tight end-to-end reporting mechanism specified, wherein no waste could potentially, it can be misinterpreted to say that no waste can go to informal waste pickers, to registered waste pickers, or to waste dealers or scrap shops. And that could very well mean the end of the informal recycling sector. I'm being a little, facetious in this, but it can potentially be interpreted in that way also. One key requirement of for the state government to come out with a scheme for registration of scrap shops has now been removed. This is something that can be introduced for sure. And the language of the draft, when we look at what generators are supposed to do, local bodies, the waste collection agencies, the waste processing agencies, when they put it all together, it really looks like there is an intention and a direction to promote end-to-end contracting of waste management, at least for collection, transportation, and delivery. And that could also mean that any informal sector participants can get excluded from. As mentioned by Mo before also, there was a state level advisory body where waste speakers were represented before. This has kind of been removed. And finally, the changes that did come up in the 2016 rules with the introduction of waste speakers kind of came about because there was sufficient representation in the drafting committee for the solid waste management rules, where waste speakers were able to put forth their issues, and that's why those got included to some extent. That so far is, of course, not the case, and it's something that the informal sector of waste speakers will definitely be pushing for. In terms of the overall implications and recommendations, one major recommendation is that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs should be required to issue a national guideline for how integration can take place, along with a specific detailed definition of what integration actually means. Now, there are generally four components: identification and enumeration, registration and ID cards, having different pathways for how waste pickers can be integrated into solid waste management. It could be integration as permanent workers, as contract workers, MRF-based models, DWCC models, door-to-door collection systems, so on and so forth. And finally, of course, provision of social welfare schemes based on the occupational identity of these workers. Now, this one understands that the rules cannot get into the necessary nuance of how to take this, who's a waste picker, how to identify them, where, when, who carries out the identification, what kind of ID cards need to be given, what does registration mean, does it lapse, so on and so forth. There are many nuances to this which the rules can't get to, but a detailed guideline and national policy for waste picker integration is something that can tackle this. And the Alliance of Indian Waste Pickers, with over 30 organizations all across the country, has actually prepared a super detailed draft to this extent, and we will definitely be submitting this to the ministry to promote it. The two other important aspects, I think, are one, the financing and incentive mechanisms. Currently, they are all aimed towards large contracts, or the financing and incentives is towards bioemission, composting, waste to energy, and really large or decentralized processing units. But some amount of tax exemptions and directives can be given to promote the integration of the informal waste picker. And that's really because the sector remains informal because there is simply not enough money in it. If there was, there would be ESI, PF, and all the other parts of statutory requirements that any other private sector industry is able to do. But there's simply not enough money in this, which is why it's done by the poorest, the most marginalized. And therefore, taxation, financing mechanisms, and incentives should be directed by the local, state, and central governments towards supporting and integrating waste pickers. And the one thing that I want to just say again and again is that there is a potential for exclusion of the entire informal recycling sector because of the way the language is done. I don't think it's in the intention, but definitely in the language, the entire scrap trade sector can get excluded from waste management. And while one can push for integration of waste, because in the absence of scrap traders, in the absence of aggregators, the recyclable waste has nowhere to go. And remember, India has one of the highest recycling rates because of the structure that is in place. Now, these are the broad suggestions and implications that we have drafted out. And I'll hand over the mic back to Siddharth. And yeah, we'll be working on more detailed submissions soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Harshad, for this amazing intervention. Let me now introduce Lubna to our participants, who is the next speaker. She'll be talking about bulk waste generators. Lubna is a managing trustee at Kashtakari Panchayat, and she leads the recycling, livelihoods, and sustainability work at KP. She has implemented waste picker inclusive models for zero waste and plastic waste management, been involved in advisory on extended producer responsibility, and supported waste pickers to undertake value addition activities in waste. She has a background in economics. So, Lubna, over to you. And just a small request by the interpreters is if we can talk a bit slowly so that they have time for interpretation. And for the speakers who've already done their bit, we have some questions waiting for you in the Q&A box if you could address those. Over to you, Lubna. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. And thanks, Mo, for a very good summary of the 2016 and 2024 rules. Like you said, the bulk waste generator component is something that has been added and fleshed out to a very large extent. So I'd like to go over some of the specific provisions and discuss some implications of that. So, as Mo said, the definition used to include a criteria of minimum 100 kgs of waste generated per day. In addition to that, a new criteria of minimum 5,000 liters of water consumption per day has been added. There are very different implications of both of those two in terms of looking at a residential bulk waste generator, how many households it adds up to, which I would like to unpack. The next provision is that all new bulk waste generators are expected to process their wet waste completely at source. Now, there are several existing bulk waste generators who are able to seek an exemption from the local body for the provision for the mandate to manage wet waste at source. So the rules essentially say that if it is not possible to process wet waste at source, the local body can provide an exemption for processing that waste off-site. For all dry waste, bulk waste generators are expected to send their waste to authorized recyclers or processors directly. And it seems as if the urban local body is not necessitated to use the same collection system that they use for the rest of the city for bulk waste generators. All of the bulk waste generators, which means every housing society of roughly 100 households or more, has to register on a central online portal and report waste generation and handling of all the 4 types of waste that are produced right up to the point of processing. There is the new bulk waste generator responsibility credit regime. So very similar to extended producer responsibility, there is an extended bulk waste generator responsibility which has been introduced. The way that it works is that a bulk waste generator is generating a certain quantum of wet waste, dry waste, sanitary waste, and special care waste. Say the total of all of this is at least 100 kilos. That bulk waste generator is responsible to channelize all of these to the end processor for wet waste at source as much as possible. And for the others, it needs to ensure that it is reaching an authorized recycler. Once it reaches that authorized recycler, credits will be issued by the urban local body against a fee. So if a society produces 100 kgs of waste, it needs to have 100 kgs worth of certificates. Just to show you how that works from what I've understood in the rules, I'll just walk you through how the process would flow. So a bulk waste generator, if exempted for wet waste and always for dry, sanitary and special care waste, will send waste to the final processor who will pay whatever processing fee is required to get that waste processed. So a user fee or a processing fee that covers, say, the transport and processing cost. The BWG, the waste processors, will all register and report the quantum of waste generated or the quantum of waste processed on a central online portal. The urban local body will verify that report. So if a wet waste processor says it has done X tons of waste processing coming from X number of BWGs, the ULB essentially verifies that report. Once it is verified, the BWG pays a fee for the certificate to the local body, and the local body issues a certificate to the BWG. This is supposed to be instituted in all instances for the dry, special care and sanitary waste, and for the wet waste in case it is not processed at source. Happy to answer questions about this later if it's not clear. So I just want to walk us through now some of the implications of this entire regime, most of it coming from our experience working on in situ wet waste management and consulting with other organizations all across the country who have worked quite strongly on wet waste management. So the definition, there is a big convergence. I mean, there's a big divergence between the number of households looking at a residential BWG. If you look at the waste generation, which is 100 kgs, and the water usage, which is 5,000 liters. If you convert that based on the CPH EO averages, you get roughly 100 households based on the waste generation, but roughly 37 households based on the water consumption. So it's pretty diverging in terms of what the minimum size of households should be. Another challenge so we suggest that this should be aligned. So if one is looking at roughly 30 to 40 households as the threshold size, then to add some clarity on that regard. The second thing is when the criteria for qualifying as a bulk waste generator includes something like water usage and waste generation, it implies that those need to be measured. So some criteria about what measurement is sufficient. Does it need to be measured on a single day? Does it need to be measured over a period of time? What would be the way to kind of measure this? One suggestion on that, mostly coming from the implementation on the ground, is especially for residential BWGs to have a number of housing units rather than looking at the waste generated. It makes it much more cut and dry in terms of enforcing on the ground rather than having to measure, say, waste generation or water use at each point, especially where metered water connections don't yet exist. There is also the possibility to have much more ambitious mandates. So Pune has a minimum threshold of 50 kgs rather than 100, and Indore has an even stronger threshold of 30 kgs. And this is essentially proven wet waste management at source that can happen at this scale. And it's something that the intention of the rules definitely seems to be to have as much as possible wet waste being managed at source. And we do see scope for there to be even more ambitious mandates in this regard. On compliance, Mo also alluded to this in her presentation. Every single BWG registering on a national centralized portal would be extremely cumbersome and extremely challenging. Cities till today don't have a comprehensive list of bulk waste generators, and that's been our experience implementing on the ground. A city of Pune size has somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 bulk waste generators, and ensuring that the entire population of bulk waste generators is registered might be a fairly large challenge, especially at the central level. This is something that possibly could be strengthened at the local body level, where the checks and balances can be put in place on the ground. Another anticipated change with the increase in compliance, while on one hand, there is a big positive of increased accountability of the waste generator about what is happening to their waste. One potential pitfall is that it might actually reduce transparency and introduce a certificate trading kind of regime that we've seen coming up for EPR, where compliance is managed by intermediary agencies, which are not necessarily involved in the processing themselves. Sometimes this may lead to reduced transparency because the BWG is dealing with an intermediary and not really with the processors. And so, like we've seen for EPR, where one finds that there are issues with the certificates coming from the processors, the accountability of the bulk waste generator, it's really quite indirect. So they're not really making sure that their waste is being processed. It's fairly opaque to them what is actually happening to their waste. So we feel that a stringent mandate at the local level with stronger checks and balances might reach the same objectives with less complexity. There is also another added component of a bulk waste generator fee, which is going to be over and above the cost of actually managing that waste or getting it to the authorized wet waste processor or dry sanitary special care waste processor, which doesn't really come with any additional environmental benefit, or it doesn't really cover any additional operating cost. And this is something that is just an added cost on a BWG. And while it is good to have stronger controls of how waste is managed, there is the genuine truth that waste being generated in bulk is actually more efficient and cost effective logistically to handle. So having a increased cost for bulk waste generators is not necessarily very, very well justified. And what it could do is really lead to more societies or more institutions coming up with multiple registrations and trying to stay out of this compliance, which might be a very big challenge on the ground. With regard to in situ wet waste processing, the criteria for exemptions is not very, very well defined. All it says is that the local body may issue exemptions. We feel that there is a very big scope for improvement here. Ideally, in situ wet waste management, because the technology and processes are there and proven, and India really is the land of composting. Composting processes from here have gone to the rest of the world. So there is huge scope to mandate in situ for all bulk waste generators, not just the new ones. And this can be done through adopting measures that cities such as Pune and Indore have already done, which is strict mandates on bulk waste generators, modifications to building regulations, reallocation of land within premises, and setting in place incentives, rewards, and penalty mechanisms. So property tax rebates is one kind of reward that has been tried in certain cities, a partial capital incentive just to cover the one-time cost of switching. Actually is something that cities would be able to afford given the huge operational cost that goes down from having to service bulk waste generators. One more aspect of incentivizing in situ wet waste is to make sure that the fee for off-site processing in cases where it is absolutely not possible should definitely be higher than the fee for in situ processing. What we've noticed is sometimes if land is provided or if the site is operated by the ULB directly, that the fees might actually be a little lower. There might be an incentive to actually send waste off-site, which is environmentally not as desirable at processing at source. It also generates much fewer livelihoods, and promoting hyper decentralized wet waste management is not just technologically possible, but can do a lot for employment generation within this sector. One major recommendation is that the bulk waste generator mandate be limited to wet waste. Wet waste is intuitively something that bulk waste generators can manage at source. The technologies exist. It's proven in many cities across the country that 30, 50, 70 kgs of waste can be end-to-end processed into compost or biogas right at the source. The same is not true for the other types of waste. That level of decentralized processing is not possible for dry waste, for special care waste, or for sanitary waste. Those do need to be aggregated in a certain quantity in order to be processed or recycled. The additional burden of each bulk waste generator, say a threshold bulk waste generator just producing 100 kgs would be producing just about 25 kgs of dry waste. So expecting that dry waste goes right up to a registered recycler is fairly unrealistic and might come at a very high cost. So this really means that a parallel economy is going to be set up for all of these, which may not be so easy to regulate or may be fairly expensive to additionally regulate. So the major suggestion on this regard is that the dry, special care and sanitary waste should ideally be handled by the collection, transportation and processing system that is applied to the rest of the city, and not to have a separate one for bulk waste generators. Another major recommendation is on the part of technology. So most people working in wet waste have experienced certain technologies like the 24 to 48 hour heat-based composters or the auto-rotation composters have a very, very well documented regular history of failure across the country. So in addition to having technologies that are authorized, it is important to have technologies that are banned and restricted, because what often ends up happening is that these technologies fail and it becomes a way to push more and more wet waste off-site when it can easily be handled on-site through genuinely less expensive and lower tech options like composting, like natural composting. There should be public awareness also on this regard and increased responsibility of the technology providers themselves. The compliance requirements that are laid down in the rules are limited to the operating entities, so the transporters and the processors, and nothing about the technology providers. This is a major missing piece that needs to be added into the rules, to have technology providers who just put in the machinery report on the status of their deployed machinery and how many have shut down, how many are working, to increase their own accountability. Because this is one area where, without any operational requirement to keep that facility running, most technology providers are able to keep selling failed technologies even after they shut down. There is also a little more that could be done to promote the market for compost and slurry that comes from biogas. So simple things like setting up systems for quality testing of compost that comes out of these hyper decentralized locations, and strict regulations to phase out use of chemical fertilizers by all public institutions, and encouraging genuine circularity within a local body is something that is very possible and can be supported in the way that some of the other, say, the waste to energy uptake of the energy supply has been really well thought out, and measures have been put in place for buyback, for minimum prices. Those kind of mandates should be put in to promote the production as well as the use of compost and biogas as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lubna. I mean, it was a very exhaustive intervention and very interesting as well. Due to the paucity of time, I'm moving on to the next speaker, and we'll circle back if we have questions towards the end. In the meanwhile, if you could take a few questions in the Q&A box, it's bubbling with questions and answers, so it's good to see that. So our next speaker for today is Chaitanyan Kulasekaran. Chaitanyan is associated with the Center for Financial Accountability. He holds a master's degree in international relations. He works on issues of post-consumption management of plastics with special focus on waste to energy projects. He'll be throwing some light on the waste to energy aspects of the draft rules 2024. Chaitanyan, over to you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thanks for the introduction. So today I'm going to share about the draft solid waste management rules and what it talks about waste to energy incineration. So just to give a very quick introduction about waste to energy incineration. So it is a technology in which mixed waste, food waste, vegetable waste, plastics, paper, and everything is burned in a furnace to generate heat, which is used to produce steam and run a turbine to generate electricity. So in this entire process of burning of garbage, we produce what is called as bottom ash, which is hazardous in nature, and also fly ash, which is filtered out from the flue gas of the waste to energy plants. Today, we are not going to talk about the impacts of these plants, but how waste to energy is promoted in this draft solid waste management rules. So here is a picture for you to imagine how a waste to energy incineration facility looks like. So these are huge trucks dumping mixed garbage in huge pits. And this is a crane which is used to, put it into the furnace. So you can see wood, plastic, paper, everything which is going to be burnt. So first and foremost, waste to energy is promoted in a big way in the draft waste management rules. And the draft waste management rules also promote decentralized waste management. And it defines decentralized waste management as, which involves source segregation, sorting of waste, and also managing it closest to the source of generation. So when one reads this definition, one might imagine something like this, or maybe the community compost bins, or maybe the area level or ward level vermicompost units, or windrow composting units, or maybe even larger bio-CNG plants treating, say, 40 to 100 tons of wet waste every day. But what the draft rule essentially says is that this particular facility, which is a waste to energy plant having an average size of 1,185 tons, is classified as a decentralized waste management facility. So, so here is the exact thing which says preference shall be given to decentralized processing to minimize transportation cost and environmental impact, such as biomethanation, all the good things, bio micro composting, vermicomposting, followed by option B, which is waste to energy from RDF. So the draft rules also talks about burning of garbage in other furnaces. So this is a new addition compared to the 2016 waste management rules. So these other furnaces could mean a furnace in a sugar industry or a paper industry or any industry which might use wood or coal or any fuel as a part of its process. So what this means is that there is going to be an increased push for waste to energy plants. So this is the draft proposal by the Delhi Waste Management Committee. So by 2027, the Delhi Waste Management Committee plans to add its waste management capacity by 6,400 tons. Out of this, only 302 tons is decentralized waste management facility, a bio-CNG plant at Okla, and two decentralized composters to treat 2 tons of waste every day. The rest of it is just waste to energy plants in three different locations. In fact, this has been updated very recently to include one more waste to energy plant in this place called Tehekand as well, to another 1,000 tons. So there is an urgent need, to remove waste to energy from the category of a decentralized waste management facility, and more clarity on the term furnaces and what it could mean. Next is the extended bulk waste generator responsibility certificates. So, like how Lubna had also pointed out, these are very similar to the plastic waste management rules EPR certificates. CSE has done a very, very detailed investigation of the issues with the EPR system, and it has also been shared in the chat question box, the link for the reports. So there are issues with EPR certificates as such, and then introducing a new kind of a certificate program called the extended bulk waste generator responsibility, which gives an option to either manage garbage, wet waste in-house or outsource it to someone else. So the fear is that apart from the various subsidies that a waste to energy plant gets, such as the viability gap funding, water for its operations, land at very low cost, tax exemptions, processing fees. So currently about 2,500 rupees is paid by the corporation, depending on which corporation it is. It's a little bit up and down for processing 1 ton of garbage. It essentially means that the corporation is paying 2,500 rupees to burn our garbage, and then it collects back the hazardous ash, and it's up to the corporation to manage the bottom ash. So processing fees is paid to the waste energy plants. Waste energy plants get what is called as carbon credits. It also gets what is called as plastic credits because of the EPR rules in the plastic waste management rules. The electricity it produces is the costliest in the country at 7 plus rupees per unit. And now this extended bulk waste generator responsibility certificates. So I'm going to, so this is what has happened in Delhi after the EPR rules have come into place. Delhi alone has burnt 7,35,000 tons of plastics in the financial year 2022-23, and the four waste to energy plants were incentivized, to burn the plastics. If you look at the category, clearly recyclable plastics, which belong to category 1 and category 2, have been burnt in large quantities. So we want to see that there is an explicit clarification that waste to energies will not be able to generate the bulk waste generator certificates, because we have seen from case studies earlier that these bulk waste generators could just ship their wet waste to these waste to energy plants, and just like how waste to energy plants are generating plastic credits, they can as well generate um, e, e, EBWGR certificates for wet waste. And then coming to the emission norms of the waste to energy plants. So what you see, the first picture is the 2024, and the second picture is of the 2016 solid waste management rules. So if you look at the numbers very closely, then you will find that they are the same. But the catch is that the devil lies in the notes. So in 2016, below the standards, there were these 9 important regulations which were stipulated as notes. So these 9 important regulations talked about phasing out of chlorinated plastics, which lead to the release of dioxins and furans when they are burning. It also talked about CO2 concentration in the flue gas. It talked about the temperature of the furnace that needs to be maintained by the waste to energy plants. It talked about odor. So all the 9 parameters that were listed in the 2016 solid waste management rules have been omitted in the 2024 rules, and it is really shocking to know that this has been done despite issues being raised across the country about the impacts of waste to energy plants, the health impacts, environmental impacts. So we need to ensure that all the 9 points from the 2016 rules are retained. And since the solid waste management rules is coming out after a decade, almost after a decade, other emission parameters such as HCl, carbon monoxide, SOx, NOx also need to be more stringent. So at this point, I would like to also recall the study which was done by IIT Madras about how the air in Delhi had the highest concentration of chlorine in the entire country, and how they pinpointed the source of chlorine to the burning of plastics. So the emissions from these plants need to be very stringent. So to sum up, uh, uh, we feel that there is a huge push for waste to energy, and classifying it as decentralized waste management solution further promotes this technology even in the rural areas. So newer mechanisms are introduced to promote waste to energies, but we need to together say that waste to energy needs to be excluded from these certifications. And also there is an attempt to increase the quantity of increase the number of waste to energy plants by including all furnaces as a waste to energy plant, classifying it as a waste to energy plant. And it is very detrimental to any efforts towards waste minimization, plastic production reduction, reuse, and decentralized waste management solutions. And there is also a big compromise on the environmental standards for WTE incineration emissions. So these are some of the closing remarks. So I would like to end here with this. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Chaitanyan. We are running slightly behind time. We have one more speaker for today. Let me directly move on to Ajinkya. Ajinkya is a mechanical engineer He has been working actively in the space of sanitary waste management for the past 7 years. Ajinkya, over to you.
Sure. Cool. So, Siddhant, thank you for the opportunity. So quickly, I'm just gonna share our perspective on the sanitary waste perspective. Already, where Lubna as well as Mahu touch upon certain kind of regulation change in perspective of sanitary waste in bulk waste generator aspect. So quickly, I just want to welcome where the one of the note where this time they have added one of another definition just as a sanitary products as well apart from sanitary waste, and government also bringing certain kind of duties for the waste generators, consideration of separate bins at BWGs as well as consideration of separate entire mechanism for the sound management of sanitary waste. One another aspect they have added for BWGs, where again Lubna has mentioned the data collection and reporting. So I just don't want to go back and talk about this particular topic what they have bring, but one point we have to note this here for the disposal mechanism. Government is just considering incineration as a mechanism. I will talk about that on the next slides, give what exactly changed and how it is going to affect. But one of another welcome move that from the government perspective that are trying to bring in consideration of recycling as well as reuse kind of material is EPR on sanitary products. So as per the definition, sanitary products, they have defined compromising of diapers, sanitary towels, napkins, tampons, and other incontinence sheets as well. But here, if you look in the first year itself, under part of EPR, government has asking to take care of 60% of the waste, which is kind of huge consideration of a lack of tons this kind of sanitary waste is getting generated. And they have also mentioned that for the PRBOs, to ensure effective management of sanitary waste, or sanitary waste has to be collected and sent to the registered incineration facility. So what exactly is missing? If you go, there are specific definitions as well as guidelines given by the ministry, where the first important aspect is understanding the disposal capacity, right? Because their incinerations definitely is largely scalable, but only consideration of incineration have a limited capacity to handle this kind of large volume material effectively, and where it is necessary, there is a required of capacity building. But we have to also understand when the required to build, if you want to build a new incineration facilities to just manage the sanitary waste and considering the EPR regulation around that, that were invite more infrastructure investment. And when when there is going to be happen the most significant investment in an incineration infrastructure, automatically it will create a part dependency, making it challenging for the future to make again transition to more eco-friendly and sustainable alternatives, because there is a huge amount of capex investment is going to happen. Under EPR, also incineration has been considered the mechanism for the disposal and generating the certificate, but it may offer an easy way out for the PRBOs, bypassing their liability, reducing their motivation to adopt sustainable practices, including the manufacturing of the product as well as disposal. And as mentioned, the reliance of incineration also may discourage the use of more sustainable and biodegradable material during the manufacturing processes, as where a couple of sustainable products are getting manufactured, including the cloth pads as well as diapers. And execution of mechanism of implementation of this particular EPR sanitary products has not been clear yet. So what is expected that is to build that capacity, the first, and strengthen the infrastructure, we have to consider just not about incineration or any specific CPCB approved technology for disposal of sanitary waste, and consideration of ULB's availability depending upon disposal mechanism. Clear mechanism for execution is still it is an early stage of the discussion while bringing a sanitary products and the part of EPR implementation strategy of EPR, right? How exactly is going to happen? The precise definition is important. Setting up the realistic targets, right? To set up the achievable targets as well as goals is very important. Consideration of current existing capacity and the industry's capabilities. Also, one thing that what we want to add here is incentivize where to utilize more sustainable material in the during the production itself, right? If when we will consider incineration is the end of disposal, there will be discouraged for the utilizing this kind of material, and exclusion of sustainable sanitary products, because there are certain kind of couple of industries have come out. Those are manufacturing biodegradable sanitary pads, which is ISO certified, cloth pads, diapers, so which is cloth diapers specifically. So there is no clarity. Is it something the EPR is applicable for them or not? If yes, how is going to get implemented? And it will be demotivated the innovators and technologists to design, develop new sanitary products made from the sustainable kind of material. So these are the quick inputs on what is expected in specifically in sanitary waste management, and largely the inclusion of maybe recycling or any other CPCB approved technology product which is going to be more environmental conscious, eco-friendly products or technology is going to be a well appreciated, just not depending upon the incineration as a disposal mechanism. So yeah, thank you Siddharth.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ajinkya, for that intervention. So this leaves us with about 6 minutes, and I see that the team has already answered about 65 questions in the Q&A box. There are still 4 questions that are open, and I'm sure that the panelists are working on it to get answered. But I think just to save some time, and I see that Lubna has raised her hand. Yes, please go ahead, Lubna.
Siddharth, I was wondering whether maybe we can talk about next steps. I think there's a lot of interest in the chat on what happens and how we can take forward recommendations. So can I just speak a bit about that?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Sure. So just for everyone's context, the government has given a time period of 2 months, which we are in the middle of now, to actually share written recommendations and suggestions on the rules. So if you look at the draft guidelines, which Siddharth has updated on that link, you'll see that we can email or mail in recommendations to strengthen the rules by the 8th of February. So there are a couple of weeks left. So I would encourage everyone who now has an understanding of what the mandates are in the draft rules and has suggestions about, I've seen some suggestions about waste to energy, about strengthening bulk waste generator mandates, about increasing in situ wet waste processing in the chats. I would encourage all of you to put these down and send them into the ministry. As a next step, I would like to speak a little bit on behalf of 2 alliances that we are part of. One is the Alliance of Indian Waste Pickers. The Alliance of Indian Waste Pickers has prepared a submission on essentially what Harshad presented, which is how waste pickers and the informal sector fit within these rules and what can be done to better integrate this sector and strengthen this sector within solid waste management. We would like to invite any and all of you who would be interested to understand what it is that AIW is proposing and to endorse these suggestions. I'll be happy to share our written suggestions with the entire group. You can go through them, and if you would like to put your or your organization's name on it to endorse, we can share that with the ministry along with the endorsements. Similarly, we would like to do another consultation specifically on wet waste. We do feel like there is a lot that can be done to promote in situ wet waste and sustainable technologies, and also huge scope for employment generations as well. So the Indian Zero Waste Alliance would like to also invite all of you to go through some of our recommendations. And if you agree with them, to endorse them. If you agree with some of them and want to send them in yourself, we would be happy to invite you to that as well. I will send you all the invites. We will be happy to share our PPTs and our written recommendations for you to look at, for you to review, and for you to send in yours as well. So I would strongly encourage all of you to put in your suggestions to the ministry. The details of how to get them in the draft rules themselves.
And Lubna, you did mention about the webinars that you are organizing, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So one on informal waste pickers and the demands of and the recommendations of the Alliance of Indian Waste Pickers. That will most likely be end of next week, most likely on Friday or Saturday. And in the following week, we will have a webinar that focuses on recommendations specific recommendations on wet waste management that have come in from multiple groups, and we can share that invite as well.
Okay, great, great. Thank you so much for that information, Lubna. I was also getting a few requests from the participants in terms of they are also organizing a few webinars. So feel free to mention about the webinar that you are organizing in the webinar chat so that people can get the link to register. And if they are interested, they can also register and join for the webinar that some of you are doing. So yeah, we still have a few questions, and I'm just skimming through to check. So Ajinkya, there's a question for you. It says you've already cracked the solutions for managing diapers by making crushing machines. I see that you are typing an answer, but I mean it would be good if you could also respond by making crushing machines, which is an in-house product. So is there any facility for recycling that granules after they're crushed? Ajinkya, if you would want to answer that live,
Yeah,
we can
sure.
mark it. Yeah.
So, is something I just want to understand, right? Because I think Siddhant, I will take it separately because
Mhm.
for commenting, I would love to understand what exactly is happening. Is able to
Yeah,
separate the two
yeah.
or right? I'm just
Okay, okay.
thinking privately.
No issues. No issues. Absolutely no issues. Okay, so apart from that, there are a few questions which probably are not uh, probably articulated well enough for us to understand, and we are having some trouble to respond to that. So I hope people will not mind. What I'm doing right now is dropping my email ID in the chat box. So if any of you have any suggestions which you want to share with us, we will also be sharing it with KKPKP and SWaCH, who are making a submission to the ministry. You can always reach out to the email ID that I have just shared on the chat box. Uh, with that, I will now call upon Atin to maybe give a thank you note. Atin, are you around?
Yeah, of course, I am around and I have been
Yeah,
following the discussion very closely. Let me turn on my
yeah.
video. So sorry. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm
Atin,
visible.
you would need to switch off your blur mode because,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
now
All
we
right.
can see
Okay.
you.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, the sheer number of participants. I mean, we started with almost 360 participant of the 900 people that registered, and I've been following the chat box and the Q&A box, and also tried to answer a few of them myself. While the team has been super efficient to answer most of them. As briefly as possible. I have also dropped mail IDs of you and Mo so that participants, even the panelists, if they have anything to suggest that can be considered when we consolidate all the comments in our submissions to the ministry. And of course, we can also explore whether the colleagues who joined us for for this webinar, like Ajinkye, like Chaitanyan, and even others who couldn't join because of any reason, and if they could just share their observation, so that I mean, if a observation is made by a group of organization, that always carries a lot of weight when it is being reviewed by the ministry. And it's great that we will be doing two more webinars as announced by Lubna on the agenda of waste speakers and I don't know, and wet waste management, and the other one was something else. I may have missed that as well. Lubna, you can just repeat it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Um, and I was a little scared about the time management, but at the end, I could see, just because the questions have been answered very, very efficiently. So, I mean, they are still being answered. So I think that is well taken care of. And um, I think the event has been super successful by participation and by the comments that we have received, and this is exactly why this webinar was needed. And the webinar that are being planned will definitely add a lot of value to the whole discussion, because this is our opportunity to share our feedbacks and learnings to the ministry, and then the ministry will, of course, they will receive thousands and thousands of comments from other sources as well, and then the final rules will be notified towards the end of this year, as we know. Um, we may also like to explore whether we can do something about the 4 EPR policies, the draft 4 EPR policies on paper, metal, glass, and sanitary waste. While we do the webinars, I know the time is very, very short to organize these events because it also takes a lot of preparation. I wanted to thank each and every participant who turned up for this event, and they heard the panelists very, very patiently, also offered their comments and suggestions with us. And thanks to all the panelists, especially Harshad and Lubna. The whole initiative, the whole idea of doing this webinar basically came from you. So that was extremely important. And we, having completed this webinar, we now understand why it was so important. Thanks to Sid, thanks to Mo, and everyone else in our unit for joining us as panelists and also to answer all the questions. So on this note, thank you everyone. Again, thanks to Kanya for the super efficient support and also creating rooms for interpretations for the regional colleagues who are comfortable with their own language to follow these discussions. So on this note, Sid, over to you.
Thank you so much, Atin. And just as you stopped speaking, we can see that we don't have any open questions. So we have managed to answer all of them. A big thank you to SWaCH, a big thank you to KKPKP, a big thank you to all my colleagues at Center for Science and Environment. Thank you so much, Chaitanyan. Thank you, Ajinkya, for joining and sharing the wealth of your knowledge with us and all our participants today. So with that, I end it here, and I have shared the link with you. I'll put it again as the last chat for today, chat of the day, in terms of you can visit this link and download everything that was discussed, presentations, the draft rules itself, the submissions that CSE, SWaCH, and other allies will make to the Ministry of Environment, Forest, Climate Change. And you can also find the recording of this webinar on this particular link itself. So thank you so much, everyone, for your very active participation, and signing off. Have a happy weekend. Thank you.